My sister kept telling everyone at family gatherings that my baby wasn't my husband's child as a hilarious joke. She went pale when I made her remember her funny crime. When our daughter Nora was born, she had the brightest blue eyes. Neither my husband Wesley nor I have blue eyes, but my mother did, and so did Wesley's father. And the pediatrician said it was completely normal, that it happens when both parents quietly carry the recessive gene. Everyone understood this except my sister Vivian. At Nora's first family gathering when she was 3 weeks old, Vivian took one look at her and said, "Well, we know what happened here," and winked at everyone. "Blue eyes don't come from nowhere," she said. "Maybe I had some explaining to do." My mom told her to stop. Vivian said she was just joking. Couldn't anyone take a joke anymore? But she didn't stop. At my nephew's birthday, she asked Wesley if he wanted a paternity test for Christmas. At the 4th of July barbecue, she asked me in front of 15 relatives if I wanted to confess anything. Each time she'd laugh and say she was kidding, and each time I watched it get a little deeper into Wesley. His mother started asking if he was sure. His brother pointed out that Nora didn't have his chin. One night I caught Wesley looking up DNA testing websites. He said he was just curious about ancestry stuff. At Thanksgiving, Vivian brought a DNA kit as a gift, wrapped in baby paper with a card that said, "For when you're ready for the truth," and announced to the whole table what it was. Wesley walked out and left me there with our baby and 20 relatives staring. I found him in the car, crying, saying we should just do the test to shut everyone up. I told him if he needed a test after 4 years and a planned pregnancy, we had bigger problems than Vivian. She wasn't making jokes anymore. She was running a campaign, spacing the cruelty out so that just when things felt calm, another post or comment would land. She posted pictures of blue-eyed actors captioned "Nora's real daddy." She started a group chat with female relatives, writing that I'd been distant around a certain coworker when I'd actually been on bed rest the last 2 months of the pregnancy. She said it so confidently that relatives started agreeing. My cousin told me Vivian was placing bets on when Wesley would leave me. My mom kept telling me to rise above it, so I stayed quiet, and every time I did, I could feel a little more of my marriage getting eaten away. The breaking point came at Nora's first birthday party. We'd made it clear Vivian wasn't welcome. She showed up anyway, and when Nora opened her gift in front of everyone, it was a onesie with a big question mark where the word daddy should have been, and underneath still waiting on results. The room went silent. Wesley stood up, took Nora, and walked to our bedroom, and I heard the door lock. Vivian was laughing, saying we needed to lighten up. It was a gag gift. That's when I lost it. I told her she was a miserable woman who destroyed relationships for entertainment, that her 2 divorces made sense now, that even her own kids barely spoke to her. She said if my marriage was that weak, it deserved to be destroyed. My mom tried to step in, but I wasn't done. I announced to the whole room everything she'd done for a year. The rumors, the betting pool, making my husband so paranoid he was looking at DNA tests. This wasn't humor, I said. It was cruelty. Vivian tried to leave. I followed her to the door, and I told her that if she ever contacted us again, ever made another joke, ever mentioned my daughter's eyes, I'd tell everyone what she did to Dad while he was dying. Her face went white. She tried to force out that same high laugh she always made, except it came out shaky and wrong, and her voice cracked when she said I was being dramatic. So I followed her onto the porch, and I spoke loud enough that everyone inside could hear me through the open door. I said we could discuss Dad's missing $38,000 right here in front of everyone, if that's what she wanted. I asked how she'd explain Dad's signature appearing on checks during his last 6 months of hospice, when his hands shook so badly he couldn't hold a fork. I told her I had copies of every forged check, and the fake life insurance form that moved everything to her 3 weeks before he died, locked in my safe. She turned and ran to her car, dropping her keys twice before she got the door open, and her tires squealed out of the driveway. Then I walked back inside, where my entire family was waiting, and my mother was standing right behind me with a look that told me the part I'd kept secret for 2 years was about to become everyone's business. Click here to watch part 2 of the story. My sister told my parents she was pregnant with my boyfriend's baby, and they demanded he marry her, but her lie collapsed in 3 minutes when he showed up with his mother. My sister Nadine told my parents she was pregnant with my boyfriend's baby on a Tuesday night during dinner. She didn't call ahead. She sat down at the table, waited until Dad finished saying grace, and said, "I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant, and the father is Joseph." Joseph had been my boyfriend for 3 years. We had been talking about moving in together. Nadine knew all of this because I told her everything. She was my sister, and I trusted her. When Nadine said Joseph's name, my mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Dad put both hands flat on the table. Nobody looked at me. Not once. Mom turned to Nadine and said, "How far along are you?" Nadine said 3 months. Mom said, "Have you been to a doctor?" Nadine said yes. Dad said, "Does Joseph know?" Nadine said he knows, and he's been ignoring it. That was a lie. Joseph had no idea Nadine was saying any of this because nothing had ever happened between them. They had met maybe 4 times total, always at family dinners, always with me sitting right next to Joseph. I said that's not true. Dad held up his hand and said, "Let your sister talk." Nadine started crying. She said Joseph came on to her at a barbecue last summer, and one thing led to another, and she didn't know how to tell me. There was no barbecue last summer. Joseph and I spent last summer visiting his mother in New Mexico. We were gone for 6 weeks, but my parents didn't know that because they never asked about my life. They only ever asked about Nadine. The next morning my father called Joseph. He didn't ask questions. He told Joseph he needed to come to the house on Saturday and do the right thing. Joseph called me confused and said, "Your dad just told me I need to marry your sister." I told him what Nadine said. Joseph went quiet for a long time and then said, "I'm coming Saturday, and I'm bringing my mother." Saturday came. My parents had the living room set up like a courtroom. Dad in his recliner, Mom on the couch next to Nadine, who was wearing a loose dress and had her hand on her stomach the whole time. She wasn't showing anything because there was nothing to show, but she kept rubbing her belly and talking about morning sickness. Joseph walked in with his mother Alma. Alma was a retired home health aide who spent 30 years taking care of pregnant women. She carried a large canvas bag that she set down by her feet. Dad started immediately. He said, "Joseph, we raised our daughters right, and when a man gets a woman pregnant, he steps up." Joseph said, "Sir, I have never been alone with Nadine. Not once. Not ever." Dad said, "Don't sit here and lie to my face." Nadine started crying again. Mom said, "Joseph, you should be ashamed of yourself. This girl is carrying your child, and you won't even acknowledge her." Joseph said, "I spent last summer in Las Cruces with my mother. We were there from June through July." Nadine said the barbecue was in August. Joseph said there was no barbecue in August either. "I was working double shifts at the warehouse the whole month. My supervisor can confirm every single day." Nadine wiped her eyes and said, "Well, maybe it wasn't a barbecue exactly." Dad said it doesn't matter when it happened. What matters is the baby. That is when Alma spoke up for the first time. crime. She said, Nadine, sweetheart, how far along did you say you were? Nadine said 3 months. Alma said, and who is your doctor? Nadine said she didn't want to share that information. Alma nodded and said, I understand, but since we're all here, why don't we just settle it right now? She reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a sealed pregnancy test still in the box. She set it on the coffee table in front of everyone. She said, this takes 3 minutes. If you're pregnant, we'll all know for sure and we can have a real conversation about what comes next. I watched my sister's face change. It went from teary and helpless to something stiff and guarded. Mom said she doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Alma said, with all respect, ma'am, your daughter is asking my son to give up his life and marry her based on a claim of pregnancy. A 3-minute test seems fair before we start planning a wedding, don't you think? Dad said this is ridiculous. Alma said what's ridiculous is asking a young man to marry a woman he has never touched based on nothing but her word. Nadine said I already took a test at home and it was positive. Alma said wonderful. Then this one will be positive too. 3 minutes. Nobody moved. Joseph sat with his arms crossed.
My wife's family tradition is going to ruin our son's life. My wife was 8 months pregnant when her mother showed up at our house with a lawyer and a stack of documents, trying to legally force us to name our unborn son Judas. I'd known it was coming. My wife's family had a tradition where the firstborn son in every generation, for the past 400 years, was named Judas. They had a family tree framed in their dining room with every Judas on it going back to the 1600s. My wife, Nora, was a second child and a daughter, so she got to be named Nora, basically winning the lottery. Her older brother got stuck with Judas and now goes by Jude, which isn't much better, but at least people don't immediately assume his parents hated him. When Nora got pregnant, her family was thrilled the tradition could continue, since Jude only had daughters. At the announcement dinner, her father stood up with champagne and said, "To baby Judas," and I laughed, because obviously it was a joke. Nobody else was laughing. That night I told Nora there was no way we were naming our son Judas. She agreed immediately. She said she'd always hated the tradition and thought it was cruel to saddle a kid with that name in modern times where everyone just hears the word traitor. We decided we'd name him Theo and deal with her parents being upset. We thought that would be the end of it. We were so wrong. Her family started a full pressure campaign, showing up every single day with new reasons we had to use the name. They sent boxes of baby clothes monogrammed with Judas. They ordered a custom crib with Judas carved into the headboard. They redid their guest room and painted Judas's room on the door. Her father told me he'd already added our son to the family trust, and legally it had to be Judas to qualify for the inheritance. Her grandfather, another Judas, flew in from Florida to personally guilt trip us. They held a family meeting where everyone explained how we'd be destroying 400 years of tradition. Even Jude showed up and said, "Look, it sucked for me, but you get used to it. It's part of who we are." I pointed out that he literally goes by a different name, and he said that was beside the point. Nora started to crack. After weeks of it, she started saying things like, maybe we could use it as a middle name, or what if we spelled it differently? Then her parents started dangling money. They'd pay for college. They'd give us a down payment on a bigger house, but only if we used the name. Nora started looking at houses online and taking daily calls with her parents in another room, coming out stressed and refusing to say what they'd talked about. When Nora was 8.5 months pregnant, her parents showed up with the lawyer. They wanted us to sign a legally binding agreement to name the baby Judas in exchange for $200,000 and a guaranteed inheritance. If we didn't sign, we'd be cut out of the will and cut off from the family. Nora looked at the papers, and I could see her actually considering it. I stood up and told them to get out of my house. After they left, we had the biggest fight of our marriage. She said $200,000 would change our lives. I said our son's happiness was more important than money. She said the name wasn't that bad. I said most parents don't deliberately choose to make their kid a target. We didn't speak for 2 days. Then her water broke 3 weeks early. She called me at work screaming that the contractions were already close together and she couldn't reach anyone else. I told her to call an ambulance, that I'd meet her at the hospital, and I ran to my car and drove across town as fast as I could. I never made it. A truck ran a red light 2 blocks from the hospital and hit my side of the car so hard the whole world went white. I don't remember the ambulance or the first surgery. The last thing I remember is gripping the steering wheel, thinking I had to get to Nora. When I woke up 12 hours later, my leg was in a cast, my ribs were taped, and Nora was sitting next to the bed holding our son. She was crying. She handed me the birth certificate and whispered, "I'm so sorry." The name on it was Judas. I stared at the official state seal, the printed letters, his name typed in the box where it should have said Theodore. Nora's words came tumbling out. How the doctors told her I might not make it. How her parents were in the waiting room the whole time she was delivering, telling her it was what I would have wanted, and she was so scared she just signed everything they put in front of her. They'd been in the waiting room with the paperwork ready, which meant that while I was on an operating table 2 blocks away, they hadn't been praying I'd live. They'd been waiting for the one moment I couldn't say no. Click here to watch part 2 of the story.
What was the best birthday gift you've ever received? For my 16th birthday, I thought I already knew exactly what my gift was going to be. My parents had finally agreed to let me throw my first real backyard birthday party. No little kid decorations, no family barbecue, just my classmates, music, food, and a movie projected onto a giant screen outside. I spent almost a month planning everything. I made custom invitations, picked out a playlist, rented string lights, and even convinced my dad to borrow a projector from one of his coworkers. My mom helped bake cupcakes that matched my favorite colors, and my younger brother complained the entire time because I kept making him test the decorations. The only thing my parents asked was that I invite our new neighbor. A girl named Claire had moved in a few weeks earlier. She was quiet, always reading on her front porch, and hardly talked to anyone. I rolled my eyes. My friends don't know her. My mom crossed her arms. Then this is the perfect chance. I argued for almost 10 minutes before giving up and walking next door with an invitation. Claire smiled so brightly that I almost felt guilty for not wanting her there. Almost. The day of the party finally arrived. Everything looked perfect. The lights came on just before sunset. The projector worked. The food smelled amazing. I even put together little gift bags for everyone. Then I waited 5 minutes, 10, 20, no one. I checked my phone. Nothing. I refreshed my messages. Still nothing. Eventually someone posted a story online. Every single person I invited was at another girl's birthday party across town. Someone had decided to schedule theirs on the exact same evening. Apparently everyone chose hers. No one even bothered telling me. I just stood there staring at the screen while my stomach dropped. My parents pretended everything was fine, but I could tell they felt awful. I told them I wasn't hungry hungry anymore and went inside before they could see me crying. A few minutes later, my mom knocked on my bedroom door. Claire's here. I wiped my face and forced a smile before going outside. She was standing there holding the tiniest gift bag I'd ever seen. I know I'm probably early, she said nervously. Then she looked around. Or maybe really late. I laughed through my tears. They're not coming. Her face completely fell. She quietly handed me the little bag. Inside was a handmade bracelet with tiny silver stars. I make these when I'm nervous, she explained. I thought maybe you'd like one. It honestly meant more than any expensive gift could have. I thanked her and figured we'd eat a cupcake before she headed home. Instead, she pulled out her phone. Can I make one call? About 30 minutes later, cars started pulling into our driveway. Not teenagers, adults. Claire's older sister had heard what happened. She brought her coworkers from the animal rescue where she volunteered. Then 2 neighbors showed up carrying board games. Another family brought homemade cookies. Someone else arrived with speakers. One guy unfolded a grill from the back of his truck like this. Had been planned for weeks. Within an hour, our backyard was full. People I barely knew were introducing themselves, telling funny stories, teaching card games, and treating me like we'd all been friends forever. One woman even taught us how to decorate cupcakes professionally. Another neighbor challenged everyone to a ridiculous water balloon contest that somehow ended with my dad getting completely soaked. For the first time all day, I forgot I'd been abandoned. We stayed outside until almost midnight watching an old comedy movie while everyone shared blankets and popcorn. Before leaving, every single person signed the back of my birthday banner with little messages. One wrote, "Never measure your worth by who didn't show up." I still have that banner folded in my closet. The best part came on Monday. The classmates who skipped my party suddenly wanted to apologize. They claimed they thought I had canceled. Funny, because none of them had asked. One girl saw pictures on my phone. Wait, who are all those people? I smiled. My birthday guests. She looked confused. Those are adults. Yeah, it actually looks really fun. It was. She asked if I was having another party anytime soon. I shrugged. Maybe. Can I come? I smiled politely. I think I'll keep the guest list a little smaller this time. She didn't know what to say after that. Looking back, the bracelet Claire made probably cost less than $5, but it came with something priceless.
When did you realize that girls were low-key living in their own movie? So I work at a coffee shop, not one of those trendy ones with plants everywhere, a normal one. The kind where people come in, order, sit for 4 hours pretending to work, and leave. You get 3 types of customers. Someone who orders a black coffee and treats you like a hero. Someone who orders a 14-word drink and gets mad when you repeat it back. Or a normal person. I was praying for option 3 most days. And honestly, it kept me sane. Then this girl started coming in. Every morning, same time, same drink. Iced oat milk latte with 2 pumps of vanilla. She was gorgeous. Like the kind of gorgeous where you forget how to make change. First week, we barely talked. Second week, she started smiling at me. Third week, she was leaning on the counter making conversation for 10 minutes while people behind her got annoyed. I thought maybe something was actually happening. My coworker Priya kept nudging me like, "Bro, just ask her out." I was checking the door every morning waiting for her to walk in. The type where if she was 5 minutes late, my whole shift just tanked. But I kept chickening out. Finally, one Friday, I did it. I wrote my number on her cup with a little note that said, "If you ever want a coffee that isn't from me making it, text me." Smooth. I was proud. She read it, laughed, actually blushed, and said, "I'll think about it." She texted me an hour later. We talked for 3 weeks straight, every day. Good morning texts, good night texts, the whole thing. Set up a date at a rooftop place downtown. She showed up looking unreal, and the date was going perfectly. Laughing, sharing food, telling me I was different from other guys. I was already planning date 2. Then the check came. I paid. Walked her to her car. She looked at me and said, "I don't think I feel a spark." I stood there for a second, took the hit, wished her well, and drove home like a normal adult. That's what you do. Blocked her on nothing. Didn't post anything petty. Just went back to work Monday like it never happened. She stopped coming in. Whatever. Then, 3 weeks later, my coworker Priya shows me a TikTok. Caption said, "Baristas will flirt with you for months and then ghost the second you give them a chance." I clicked it. And this girl told our entire story. And at the end, she said she was heartbroken that I stopped talking to her after she opened up to me. I had to sit down in the back room. She rejected me on the sidewalk next to her Toyota. I texted her and asked what she was talking about. She said I should have fought for the connection. "Ma'am, you told me there was no spark. That's not a puzzle. That's a sentence." So I figured, all right, let's see where this goes. I texted her, "Coffee's on me if you want to talk it out." Somehow, she said yes. Came into the shop the next morning. Same drink, same energy. We were laughing about the video. She was flirting. Told me she'd been thinking about me. I flirted back. Everything was going great. Then, right as I handed her the drink, she stops completely, looks me dead in the eyes and says, "Actually, I don't date service industry guys. Sorry." I said, "Have a great day." Went back to the espresso machine. No reaction. 2 days later, she made another video. Same topic. Said men have no ambition.
"Your little hobby is dead," Dad declared as he signed the deed. My phone buzzed. AI Core patent secured bidding. Starts at 5.2 billion. I smiled. About that. Signature. Beacon. Mahogany table in my father's boardroom. Felt as cold as the man himself. I sat across from him, watching him adjust his heavy gold Rolex. My older brother Marcus stood by the window, swirling a glass of scotch with a smug grin that made my blood boil. For 28 years, I was the ghost of the Sterling family, the ultimate disappointment. Marcus was the golden boy, the charismatic VP of our family's legacy real estate firm. I was just the quiet coder they had banished to the basement IT department. But today, they weren't just ignoring me. They were officially erasing me. "It's for the best, Julian," my father said, his voice dripping with fake manufactured sympathy. "You don't fit into the future of this company." What he really meant was that Marcus had bled the company dry with ad investments, and they needed a scapegoat to take a fall. Worse, they were forcing me to sign away my 15% stake in the family trust for absolute pennies on the dollar. When Mom died, she left me that equity because she was the only one who believed in me. My father had spent the last 5 years trying to pry it from my hands. The contract sitting in front of me was a legal guillotine. It stated that upon signing, I forfeited all future claims to Sterling assets, but there was a secondary clause my lawyer had sneakily fought to include. A clause their arrogant corporate lawyers didn't care enough to scrutinize. It stated that the Sterling estate permanently forfeited any and all rights to my independent intellectual property. "Just sign it, Jules," Marcus sneered, taking a sip of his drink. "Take the buyout and finally get a real job." My father father slid his heavy Mont Blanc pen across the polished wood. Your little hobby is dead, Dad declared, tapping the paper impatiently. You've spent 3 years typing gibberish in a dark room while your brother closed actual deals. It's time to grow up. My little hobby was a predictive neural network, an advanced AI architecture designed to optimize global supply chain logistics with zero human latency. They thought I was sitting down there playing video games. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name in smooth black ink. My father snatched the document back instantly, eager to finalize the theft. He quickly scribbled his own signature on the bottom line, cementing the severance, the official seal of my exile. Done, my father said, leaning back with a deeply satisfied exhale. You have 30 days to vacate your apartment. Marcus needs it for his new wife. I looked at the freshly signed deed. I was officially cut off, and totally legally financially independent. Right on cue, my phone vibrated violently against the table. The screen lit up in the dim room. A direct message from my lead negotiator in Silicon Valley. AI core patent secured. Bidding war between tech giants has commenced. Starting offer at $5.2 billion. I stared at the glowing screen. $5.2 billion with a B. A strange, icy calm washed over me. All those years of being called useless. All the missed family dinners. The relentless quiet disrespect. It all vanished in a single second, replaced by the crushing weight of absolute power. I let out a low, slow chuckle. It echoed loudly in the silent boardroom. Marcus frowned. What's so funny? Did you finally snap? I picked up my phone, flipped it around, and slid it across the mahogany table. It stopped right on top of the freshly signed severance agreement. My father looked down, annoyed. Before his eyes locked onto the illuminated text message, I watched his pupils dilate. I watched the arrogant color drain from his face, leaving him looking like a pale, trembling ghost. Marcus walked over, glancing over our father's shoulder. His scotch glass slipped from his fingers, shattering into pieces onto the hardwood floor. What is this? My father whispered, his voice cracking violently. I stood up, slowly buttoning my cheap suit jacket. I had never felt taller in my entire life. You see, Dad, I said, my voice completely deadpan. My AI architecture just secured its patent, and 3 of the biggest tech companies on Earth are currently fighting over it. My father's eyes darted frantically to the severance papers, the papers he had just proudly signed, the papers that legally, bindingly severed him from any claim to my assets. Wait, my father stammered, reaching out a trembling hand. Julian's son, we didn't mean— We can renegotiate this. I smiled, a cold, empty expression that perfectly matched the man who raised me. About that signature, Dad, I whispered, leaning in close enough for him to hear my heartbeat. It's ironclad. You just traded a $5 billion empire for 50 grand. I turned my back on them and walked toward the heavy oak doors. Julian, get back here! Marcus screamed, his voice thick with sheer panic. I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. The heavy doors clicked shut behind me, sealing them in the tomb of their own making. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, a newly minted billionaire, and for the first time in my life, an only child.